I pulled into the leasing office in Denver, Colorado, feeling the kind of nervous excitement that makes your fingers tap the steering wheel without you noticing. It had taken me 3 years of saving, budgeting, skipping nights out, taking extra shifts, everything just to finally afford this apartment. I walked inside, rehearsing the signature I had dreamed of putting on the lease, only to be met with a strange, stiff smile from the manager, as if she already knew something was about to shatter. And before I could even sit down, she said the sentence that made the floor tilt under my Luffin, someone already claimed your apartment. That would have been terrifying enough, but what terrified me more was the flicker of recognition in her eyes, as if she had seen me yesterday. My pulse hammered as she slid the file across the counter toward me. I opened it with trembling fingers, expecting maybe a mixed-up name or a typo, anything normal, anything fixable. But seeing my own name written in bold on the leasing line felt like being punched. The signature below it, though, was wrong. The loops were sloppy, the slant too dramatic, the confidence fake. Someone had tried to be me. And right when I was about to ask the manager who had walked in pretending to be me, she leaned closer and whispered, almost apologetically, "Sir, the person who signed it said they were your friend." For a moment, I thought it had to be a misunderstanding, but then she said the name I never expected to hear, and my stomach twisted sharply. "Evan?" she repeated, checking her paperwork again like a teacher confirming a failing grade. The name echoed in my head. Evan, my best friend since middle school, the guy I trusted more than my own brothers, the person I shared job updates, apartment plans, and even my social security photo with when he needed help on his college forms years ago. And now he had signed away the apartment I had bled for as me. My jaw clenched until it hurt. A coldness spread up my spine, not from fear, but from something darker, betrayal so sharp it almost hummed. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, the manager added quietly, "He moved in last night." That meant he hadn't just stolen my name. He had already stepped into the life I was supposed to start today. I staggered out of the office in a daze, the Colorado wind hitting me like an accusation. I tried calling Evan straight to voicemail. I texted him nothing. I even checked his social media. No updates, no signs of life. All the while, a memory kept replaying. Last week, when I told him I finally got approved and how excited I was. He had smiled, but there was something strange in it, something unreadable. Now I realized it wasn't pride, it was calculation. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened, replaying every moment of the last month, wondering how long he'd been planning this. And then my phone buzzed with a notification that didn't make sense at first. A bank alert showing a withdrawal I never made, from a city I hadn't even visited. My name is Marcus Klein. I'm 28 years old, born in Boise, Idaho, a small town where people remember what truck you drove in high school and never let you forget the dumb things you did as a teenager. Growing up, life felt simple: work hard, be decent, stay out of trouble. But after my mom died and my dad downsized the house, Boise didn't feel like home anymore. So I packed my old toolbox, loaded my pickup, and drove to Denver hoping for a fresh start, something clean, something mine. I thought leaving Boise meant leaving my problems behind. But the moment I arrived, I discovered one of those problems had arrived earlier than I did. I've spent the last 8 years working HVAC, crawling under houses, fixing broken units on rooftops during heat waves, breathing in dust older than my grandparents. Long hours, burned fingertips, and the constant smell of chemicals that cling to my clothes no matter how much detergent I use. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work. The kind that earns a man respect without needing attention or applause. I lived quietly, saved dutifully, and planned every dollar. I wasn't rich, but I was steady until I walked into that leasing office and learned that even steady foundations can crack without warning. Growing up, I never had much besides my tools and my stubborn work ethic, and Evan. He showed up in my life in 7th grade. A scrawny kid with chipped glasses and a habit of staring too long at people like he was memorizing their faces. I sat with him at lunch because he looked lonely, and from that day forward, we stuck together. Sleepovers, late-night gaming marathons, fixing bikes, sharing clothes when one of us tore something, we were inseparable. People joked we were like brothers, and sometimes we even believed it. But brothers don't steal each other's names, do they? At least, they're not supposed to unless they've been preparing for years. Evan had always been the quieter one, the thinker, the observer. He noticed things most people ignored. He could copy accents, mimic voices, forge your handwriting after watching you write once. It was a weird talent we used to laugh about. I used to tease him that if HVAC didn't work out, he could become a spy or a con artist. He would smirk, shrug, and say, "You never know." Back then, it felt like harmless joking between best friends. Now those memories feel like warnings I was too blind to see. Because somewhere along the line, that talent stopped being a joke and started becoming practice. People always told us we were so close we could practically switch places. But the older we got, the more I realized something. I relied on Evan, but Evan depended on me. He followed me to high school clubs, copied my career path ideas, even asked me to help him write job applications, just so ours matched. I? I thought it was flattery. Maybe loyalty. I never realized it was obsession. And the worst part? As I pieced these memories together in my truck after the leasing office incident, my phone buzzed again with a second alert this time, showing a plane ticket purchased under my name. Evan had been drifting for years, long before either of us left Idaho. While I was climbing rooftops, fixing AC units, and saving for a future, he was bouncing between part-time jobs like a pinball dishwasher one month, barback the next, delivery driver until he totaled someone else's car. He'd get fired, swear it wasn't his fault, and then show up at my place with a duffel bag and that half smile that always meant he needed something. I told myself he just needed guidance, a push, a friend. But standing in that Denver parking lot staring at those fraudulent bank alerts, I realized he didn't want guidance at all. He wanted my life handed to him without having to earn any of it. Still, I helped him. Every damn time. When he bounced out of his apartment because he forgot, to pay rent for 3 months, I let him crash on my couch. When he overdrafted his bank account, buying shoes he didn't need, I spotted him groceries. When he claimed his phone bill randomly doubled, I covered that too. I didn't help him because I was naive. I helped him because I believed loyalty meant something. I thought one day he'd get back on his feet, and all this would just be a rough chapter in our friendship. But instead of climbing out, he seemed to sink deeper, and he started grabbing my shoulders on the way down. I loaned him money more than I realized until much later. I let him use my laptop when his broke because he spilled soda on the keyboard. He said he just needed to send a few job applications. I didn't know then that while I slept on the opposite couch, he was exploring every saved password my browser had auto-filled over the years. Everything I kept private banking, tax documents, work history sat right there on the screen, and he scrolled through it like reading a menu. At the time I thought nothing of it, he was my best friend. But now, with all the pieces falling together like a puzzle I never knew I was building, I could see it clearly. He didn't just borrow my laptop, he borrowed my identity. Every time I confronted him about money, he would tilt his head, pull that guilty but charming expression, and say, "I'll pay you back." And I'd believe him. Maybe next month. Maybe after his new job starts. Maybe after he figures things out. The truth was, he never figured anything out because I kept figuring it out for him. I became his safety net, his lifeline, the person he always ran to when he burned another bridge. I mistook dependence for friendship. But now I realize something worse. He wasn't trying to repay me, he was slowly replacing me. The last conversation we had before I left Idaho should have been a warning. I told him I got approved for the apartment and was moving to Denver for a fresh start. He stared at me for a long moment, too long, then said, "Don't forget who was there for you when nobody else was." I laughed it off back then, thinking he was just sentimental. But now the sentence replayed in my mind with a darker tone, like a threat I hadn't recognized. He didn't mean, "Remember me." He meant, "You owe me." And as that realization clicked into place, my phone buzzed again. This time with a notification saying someone had tried to change my password from inside the new apartment. I drove straight to the apartment complex, still shaking from the password change alert. The parking lot was quiet, sun sinking behind the buildings, casting long shadows that made everything feel heavier. I didn't know what I expected to find Evan panicking. Maybe running, maybe hiding, but as soon as I walked toward my unit, something even stranger happened. The neighbors greeted me like I belonged there. "Hey Marcus, didn't know you were out." One guy called from his balcony, raising his beer like a salute. A woman walking her dog waved cheerfully and added, "Your friend's inside." And with every friendly greeting, my stomach twisted tighter. They didn't see a stranger walking up to a stranger's home, they saw the person Evan had convinced them was me. My heart hammered as I pushed open the door. It wasn't locked. My name, my identity had opened it for him. The moment I stepped inside, a cold rush washed over me. Because the place didn't just look lived in, it looked like I lived in it. Pictures of me lay scattered across the kitchen counter, printed from my old social media accounts. Some were from high school, some from my first job, some I forgot even existed. My resume updated, formatted, printed was pinned to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a tiny wrench, almost like he was mocking my HVAC career. On the table sat unopened envelopes addressed to me, forwarded as if I had moved in days ago. I stared around the apartment in disbelief, realizing with creeping horror that Evan hadn't just taken my place. He had curated a version of me he thought he deserved more than I did. My pulse roared in my ears as I walked deeper into the living room. The couch was identical to the one I used to have back in Boise. The boots by the door looked exactly like mine. Even the toolbox near the window, old, scratched, dented, looked like a replica of the one I still kept in my truck. Every detail in the apartment felt like a funhouse mirror version of my life. Except someone else was standing where my reflection should have been. And then I heard footsteps behind the bedroom door. Slow, familiar. I braced myself, because deep down, I already knew who it would be. But I wasn't prepared for what he looked like when he stepped out. He was wearing my jacket, my favorite one, the one I thought I lost. Evan walked toward me with the casual was calm of someone who wasn't caught doing something insane, but merely interrupted during a normal day. He adjusted the collar, smoothed the sleeves like he was trying it on for size my size. He didn't look guilty. He didn't look scared. He looked comfortable, like he had been waiting for me to show up. When our eyes met, he smiled, an easy, relaxed smile I had seen 1,000 times. A smile he had always used to get out of trouble. A smile he knew worked on me. Then he said, as if this whole nightmare was logical, "Bro, don't ruin this. I needed a fresh start too." And before I could respond, he added something that made my blood run cold. "Besides, everyone already believes I'm you." For a moment, I couldn't respond. I just stood there, staring at Evan in my jacket, in my apartment, living my life as casually as someone picking up groceries. But the worst part wasn't the jacket, or the photos, or even the mail. It was the stack of folders on the coffee table, neatly organized, color-coded, labeled with my name in handwriting that mimicked mine almost perfectly. I opened the first folder and felt my stomach plummet. Bank statements, recent ones. There were deposits, withdrawals, transfers, all under my name, all unauthorized. Evan had opened a brand new bank account as me, and had been using it long enough that he'd memorized my financial footprint better than I had myself. And before I could process that, I noticed the second folder, credit applications. I flipped through the pages, each one worse than the last. Utility forms, electric bills, water service approvals, every line filled out in handwriting that wasn't mine but looked close enough that no company bothered to question it. He had set up the entire apartment, every bill, every account under my identity, as if he had been rehearsing it for years. My jaw tightened as I looked up at him. "How long?" I asked. He shrugged like the question bored him. "Long enough." I looked down again, and that's when I saw it. A gym membership contract with my digital signature copied and pasted at the bottom, along with a note the staff had written. "Marcus prefers early mornings." I hadn't even exercised regularly since high school. He wasn't just living as me, he was rewriting who Marcus was. On the counter, another pile of papers caught my eye, printouts from dating apps, profiles, matches, conversations, all under my name. He had taken pictures of himself from flattering angles, scribbled HVAC jokes he barely understood, and told girls he was an HVAC technician making solid money. He told them he liked hiking at sunrise. He told them he was new to Denver and looking for something real. He had even listed my real job history, my real certifications, my real hobbies. A twisted impersonation of everything I'd worked for. I scrolled through one of the conversations and saw a message he sent the night before. "It's been a long week at work. HVAC can be a grind." A message sent while he lounged in my apartment and while I was still unemployed. But the deepest cut came when I found the email thread. Printed, highlighted, organized. It was correspondence with the company I had moved, states for the company I'd planned my entire move around. I flipped through page after page, sick to my stomach. He had applied using my resume, my references, my work history. He had taken the phone interview pretending to be me. He had gone to the in-person interview wearing my clothes. And then it hit me. They hired him. They hired Marcus Klein. They hired my best friend, pretending to be me. I felt something crack inside me, something I didn't know had a breaking point. "You took my job?" I whispered. Evan didn't even blink. "It wasn't fair that everything works out for you, man. I just evened the playing field." He leaned back on the couch like he owned the place because technically, on paper, he did. Then he smirked and added, "Besides, they like me. They said I'm exactly what they were hoping for." And just when I thought I had heard the worst of it, he said one more thing. "Oh, and they think you start Monday." I stormed out of the apartment before I did something I'd regret, slamming the door behind me so hard the frame rattled. My hands were shaking, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. There was only one group of people I thought would understand: my family. The people who had watched me work myself to the bone for years, scraping and saving for a life Evan had stolen in a matter of weeks. I called my mom first, pacing the parking lot like a madman. When she answered, her voice was warm, soft, everything I needed in that moment. But after I told her everything, after I explained how Evan had taken my apartment, my job, my entire identity, she sighed deeply and said 9 words that made my blood turn cold. "Oh, honey, Evan's had such a rough time. Let him get back on his feet." I froze. I couldn't believe it. "Did you hear what I just said?" I snapped. "He stole my life." I expected shock, outrage, concern. Instead, she chuckled sympathetically, like I was overreacting. She reminded me of how Evan struggled in school, how his parents were always absent, how he never had the advantages I had. Advantages? I worked through my advantages, I earned every inch of them. But to her, that didn't matter. She had always been soft with him, always saw him as a lost kid needing guidance. I realized she didn't just sympathize with him. She had been enabling him all along. She told me I was overthinking it, that Evan probably didn't mean harm, that boys do stupid things when they're desperate. I clenched my fists so tight my nails dug into my palms. Desperate didn't explain forging documents. Desperate didn't explain stealing mail. Desperate didn't explain impersonating me at a job interview. He crossed every possible line, I said, my voice breaking. He could ruin my credit, get me arrested, destroy my reputation. My mother's calm reply cut through me like a blade. "Marcus, you have enough opportunities. Share, share, share." She said it so casually, as if sharing my entire existence was the same as splitting a sandwich. I stopped pacing. My breath caught in my chest. Share my name? Share my Husing? Share my Job? What was left of me if he took all of that? Did my mother honestly expect me to just let him impersonate me? Let him take the life I spent years building? I asked her that directly, my voice trembling with disbelief. There was a long pause on the "my be" line, and then she whispered, "He just needed help, Marcus. You've always been blessed." Blessed? I felt anything but blessed standing outside the apartment a stranger was living in under my identity. And that's when something clicked. This wasn't the first time Evan had taken something from me with her approval. I remembered all the times growing up when Evan borrowed my clothes, my school supplies, my allowance only for my mother to say, "Be nice, Marcus. He doesn't have much." Every memory hit me like a punch to the ribs. My childhood had been grooming ground for this very moment. My generosity wasn't kindness. It was training. Training him to expect access. Training him to expect my life to be his safety net. And right when I realized what decades of that had created, my mother whispered something I'll never forget. "Besides, Evan said you told him he could use your name." The days after that phone call with my mother felt like wandering through a fog I couldn't escape. Every hour, every minute, I replayed my mother's words. Evan's smirk, the fake accounts, the job he stole. My life no longer felt like something I lived. It felt like a script someone else had memorized. And every time I thought it couldn't get worse, something else would crack. But the breaking point, the moment everything snapped, came one night when the police knocked on the door of the apartment that wasn't mine anymore. I was standing outside, arguing with Evan yet again, when the officers approached and asked a simple question: "Are you Marcus Klein?" I opened my mouth to answer, but before a syllable escaped, Evan stepped forward, like he'd rehearsed the moment. He didn't flinch, didn't hesitate, didn't even glance at me. He just lifted his chin and said, "Yes, I'm Marcus." Smooth, confident, like he'd said it 1,000 times. The officers exchanged a quick look, and one of them pulled up something on a tablet. I didn't understand what was happening until they told him there was an alert connected to his name. My name. A traffic violation that had escalated into unpaid fines, missed court dates, and eventually, a bench warrant. Evan's eyes widened for the first time since this nightmare started. The officers moved without hesitation, turning him around and cuffing him. And while he sputtered and cursed, the world slowed around me. They believed he was me so much that they were arresting him in my place. I pulled out my real ID so fast I nearly dropped it. I'm Marcus Klein, I said. He's been impersonating me. The officers paused, studying me, studying him, comparing our faces. Two men who grew up together. Two men whose lives had overlapped too much. One officer examined the ID, scanning it with a handheld device while the other held Evan beside the squad car. For a terrifying second, I thought they might not believe me. I thought this nightmare would twist even deeper, that maybe I'd be the one thrown into handcuffs. But finally the scanner beeped green, and the officer looked up at me with a soft, almost apologetic expression. "You're the real Marcus," he said quietly, and suddenly the world felt even heavier. They explained the situation gently, like they didn't want to break me with the truth. Evan had been using my name for months, opening accounts, applying for jobs, talking to neighbors, building a paper trail thick enough to confuse the system. To the digital world, to the businesses, to the city, he was Marcus Klein. The officer told me I was lucky the warrant was minor, lucky I wasn't pulled over, lucky I wasn't the one being dragged to the station. Lucky. The word tasted bitter. Evan should have been terrified, but instead he stared at me from the back seat of the squad car with something far darker than fear, resentment. And as they closed the door, he mouthed something. Silently. "You did this." The officers promised they'd file a report, notify the fraud department, and help me start the process of reclaiming my identity. But as they drove away with him in the backseat, I realized something chilling. For months, he had lived as me so convincingly that even the police believed him. That meant friends, employers, landlords, banks, everyone had been treating him as Marcus Klein. And then, just as the taillights disappeared around the corner, my phone vibrated with a new email notification. An eviction notice addressed to Marcus Klein for an apartment I'd never lived in. I spent the next 24 hours gathering everything I could, every document, every screenshot, every scrap of evidence that proved Evan had crawled into my life like a shadow and started wearing my skin. Fake leases, job forms, bank statements with forged signatures, text messages where he pretended to be me, copies of my own photos printed and stored like trophies. Every piece I collected felt like a punch to the ribs, reminders of how deep he'd gone, how far he was willing to stretch to become someone he wasn't. By the time I had everything stacked in a manila folder, my hands were trembling with equal parts anger and exhaustion. But as overwhelming as the evidence was, none of it hurt as much as realizing how easy I made it for him. The jail visitation room was cold, quiet, and humming with fluorescent lights that buzzed like dying insects. I sat down on my side of the glass, folder under my arm, waiting for them to bring Evan in. When he walked through the door and saw me, his expression didn't falter. Not guilt, not shame, not fear. Just annoyance. Like I had interrupted something important. He sat down across from me and picked up the phone receiver with a slow, deliberate motion. I did the same, staring through the scratched glass at the person I thought I knew. Then I placed the folder on the counter between us. "This is everything," I said. "Everything you stole." He didn't look at the folder once. His eyes never left mine, like the papers didn't matter because he thought he still owned the truth. I slid the first page toward the glass. A fake bank application. Then a utilities form. Then a digital printout of his dating profile, using my name. The stack kept growing, piece by piece, a mountain, that of proof that should have broken him. But Evan didn't flinch, didn't swallow hard, didn't shift in his seat. He simply leaned back in the plastic chair and stared at me with a coldness I had never seen before, not even in the worst moments of his life. I waited for the apology I had once believed he was capable of, the remorse, the explanation, but instead, he leaned closer to the glass and said, "You always had more than me, Marcus." And hearing that, hearing jealousy, instead of regret, told me this wasn't a mistake. It was a mission. "You have no idea what I've been through," he continued, voice low and venomous. "Everyone handed things to you. Jobs, opportunities, friends, a family that actually gave a damn. I got scraps. I deserved a chance. I deserved your life." He said it with a straight face, like he was explaining a simple equation, something obvious and logical. I stared at him, stunned. "You deserved a chance," I repeated quietly. "So you stole mine?" His jaw tightened, and he hissed, "You owe me. All of this, you owed me your life." And in that moment, something ruptured inside my chest, not from anger, but from mourning the person I thought he was. The last thread of loyalty, the last echo of childhood memories, the last piece of me that believed he ever cared, that part snapped clean in half. I realized the friend I'd grown up with didn't exist anymore. Maybe he never did. Maybe I had loved a mask he wore for years. Evan leaned back in his chair, smirking at the damage he saw in my expression. But then I stood up, gathered the folder, and whispered into the phone. "This ends now." And as I walked away, one of the guards called after me. "Mr. Klein, you might want to stay." He requested another visitor, someone claiming to be your Klein brother. The days after that jail visit felt like waking up in the aftermath of a tornado, one you never saw coming, one you weren't prepared to survive. I left the visitation center with the folder of evidence tucked under my arm and a hollow pit in my chest. The first thing I did was file an official identity theft report. Sitting in that cramped office, filling out forms detailing every account, every signature, every email he touched, it felt unreal, like I was describing a stranger's life. But it was mine. Every line I wrote was a piece of my stolen existence. When the officer stamped the final page and handed me the confirmation, I thought I'd feel relief. Instead, all I felt was grief. Because every signature I reclaimed was another reminder of how much he had taken. Next came freezing my credit. I sat on hold for hours, bank after bank, agency after agency, repeating the same story until the words barely sounded like language anymore. Each representative gasped, apologized, filed notes, flagged accounts. Some asked questions that made my stomach twist. "Have you shared your passwords with anyone? Has anyone had access to your devices recently? Do you know who might be responsible?" Yes. Yes. And yes, my best friend. Every call closed another door Evan had walked through pretending to be me. But every step forward also revealed something new he'd tampered with. Things I didn't even know he had access to. Alerting employers felt humiliating, even though it wasn't my fault. I had to call the company Evan fooled with my resume and explain that the Marcus they hired wasn't me. Human resources listened, stunned, then embarrassed, then cautious. They couldn't believe they had hired an imposter, but the worst part was knowing Evan had walked into their building, shaken their hands, smiled my smile, and told them lies in my name. Months later, after background checks, legal reviews, and enough paperwork to fill a filing cabinet, they finally gave me the position I had moved states for. I should have felt victorious. But sitting at my new desk on the first day, all I could think was, I was working a job he had already lived. But the apartment, the one he stole, the one he moved into under my identity, was a different battle entirely. When the landlord reviewed the damages after his arrest, they didn't see Evan's name on anything. Every unpaid bill, every scratched wall, every broken fixture, they all traced back to Marcus Klein. I fought it with documents and reports and police statements, but bureaucracy moves slower than truth. In the end, I was still held financially liable for repairs. I wrote a check for a place I had never slept in, never lived in, never even stepped into, until after he claimed it. And as the cashier's check left my hands, I felt another harsh truth settle in. Cleaning up identity theft doesn't just take time, it takes pieces of you. Evan's family called me soon after, but not to apologize. His mother left voicemails sobbing, saying I ruined his future. His uncle told me I should have handled things privately. His sister texted me paragraphs, accusing me of betrayal. Betrayal. The word made my hands tremble. They didn't blame him for forging signatures, or lying to employers, or impersonating me for months. They blamed me for reporting what he did. "You got him arrested," they said. But the truth burned hotter than anything they threw at me. I didn't get him arrested. He walked himself into those handcuffs pretending to be me. Months passed. Paperwork faded. Credits slowly repaired. Life steadied. But even as things improved, one lingering question nagged at me late at night. If Evan had gone this far, what was he planning next? A year passed, 12 long months of rebuilding what Evan shattered, of reclaiming pieces of myself he tried to erase. Life moved slower after the chaos, quieter, like the world itself was giving me space to breathe again. But even with the distance, reminders still found their way to me. Letters from rehab, emails filtered into spam, messages requesting calls, Evan's voice pleading, apologizing, reminiscing, kept trying to step back into my life through every crack he could find. He wrote that he wanted forgiveness, that he wanted a second chance, that he wanted brotherhood again. I read his words once, but realized they were written by a man who still believed he deserved pieces of me. He said rehab changed him. He said he finally understood the pain he caused. He said losing everything taught him gratitude. Maybe some of that was true. Maybe rehab really did shift something inside him. But every message carried the same undertone, the same expectation that I would pick up where he left off, that I would fold back into the dynamic we had as kids, that I would stand beside him like nothing happened. We're brothers, he wrote in one letter. We can start over. You know I always needed you. And reading that, something inside me twisted not from anger but in clarity. Needing someone doesn't justify becoming them. I learned something in the wreckage of everything he took. A real friend doesn't want your life, they want you in theirs. They don't steal your name, your home, your job, or your opportunities. They don't step into your skin when their own identity feels too small. Real friendship is foundation, not possession. Support, not replacement. For years, I mistook Evan's dependency for loyalty. But dependency is a hunger that grows teeth when you feed it too long. And for the first time, I understood that his need for me had never been brotherhood, it had been ownership. So I rebuilt. Slowly, carefully, one piece at a time. I found a new apartment, one I signed for with confidence instead of fear. A place where every wall, every key, every utility bill had my real name on it, not a forged one. I made new friends, people who met me, not the version Evan had crafted in his impersonation. People who liked me for my quiet nature, my work ethic, my stability, not for the ease of taking advantage of me. And as I grew, as my circle expanded, I realized how small my world had been when Evan occupied so much space inside it. Freedom didn't feel like losing him. It felt like finally stepping out of a room he'd locked me in. I added identity protections, froze accounts, layered security over every digital corner of my life. Not out of fear, but out of wisdom, out of survival, out of the awareness that identity is fragile when you've seen someone else slip into yours like a costume. And as the system strengthened, so did I. For the first time in years, I felt like the rightful owner of my own name, my own future, my own story. Because no one else's fingerprints were on it anymore. A year after everything happened, I woke up one morning, looked in the mirror, and didn't see a shadow behind me. Not his, not the past, not the guilt of what I missed or the weight of what he stole. Just me, flawed, steady, rebuilding, whole. Evan still reaches out from the programs he cycles through, but I stopped answering. Not out of cruelty, out of closure. Because the truth is simple. I don't need a shadow to feel whole. And I'm done letting someone else try to live in mine.